Lila, and Teeps, and Flora, and me. Rocket.
Boost! Fire!
This has happened before.
Advisor.
The Sega Genesis, my first and last hurrah involving Nintendo's first bitter rival. Ever since 1991 at my second mom and pop shop, this was an instant hit. This was the system that declared war in the 16-bit era as it released its hyper campaign with the phrase,
What Nintendo?
It continually prided itself with blast processing, always mocking Mario since Sonic is cooler, runs faster like the Genesis's format, and was even lesser expensive. Despite Nintendo's eventual victory, it doesn't mean the Genesis also consisted of several hit games. But it wasn't quite as impressive, so I limited to just 15. Same rules apply as I try and limit to one per franchise. And I won't be counting its predecessor, the Mega Drive, as I'd never experienced it. As stated, it's the first and last hurrah of Sega for me. So I'll try and make the best of it before its downfall. Let's see what Nintendo don't, shall we?
Sega!
Starting this Sega journey is one of the earliest titles I'd ever encountered in 1991 at my parents' second mom and pop shop, Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. Ironic since it was known as the fifth game in the Alex Kidd series. We guide Alex through 11 levels within the planet Ares, and oftentimes he needs to collect coins or bombs by punching and kicking enemies in order to play the rock, paper, scissors games, known as Jenkin, in order to progress through them by earning vehicles, including a helicopter, pogo stick, motorcycle, and even the pedicopter, which was introduced before Green Dog. His mission is to find his dad, King Thor, who is still alive but captured on planet Paper Rock, oddly enough. It was a tad simple and it can take about 20 minutes to beat, but the reason it's only at the bottom is because that Alex often takes instant kills, much like Gradius or Silver Surfer, and the layout's not as relenting as in Donkey Kong Country. So if you aren't dedicated, this game can really be a chore. Fun fact, a lot of people had considered Pokemon to be the earliest example on seeing jelly-filled donuts, or rather rice balls. But to me, I vaguely recalled seeing them here, actually, as well as an elementary example on what prairie dogs, scorpions, and blowfish were. Also, I always dread on opening those gray chests, as 9 times out of 10, you'd see black bombs pop out and explode instantly if they happen to be onto you. I hate them! It was indeed one of the first Genesis games I'd played, but I can find other titles that seem better by difficulty, instead of a back-breaking, tedious ride. barely taking 14 is this random game I just recently rediscovered, the boat shooter Bimini Run. This was just another case in which inevitable curiosity got to me like a tick. And it wasn't as interesting as I thought. Basically, you steer a motorboat as you traverse from level to level, mostly within an archipelago. And it's actually involved in military operations as it shoots down enemy vessels. You play as both the sailors Kenji and Luca, who are secret agents tasked in rescuing Kim O'Hara, who's Kenji's sister. Their enemy, Dr. Orca, has hired many other boatmen and helicopter pilots to protect his island lab and fortress. If it weren't for that phrase giving you new objectives,
Kenji, come in.
I probably wouldn't have recognized it, but I guess my mind did me a favor. It can be a tedious shooter, and a single collision can capsize your ship. Although I have to admit, some of the music and even the graphics made it intriguing, especially when it suddenly transitions from a calm to a stormy route. Little did I know that this game can be played in co-op, but I never knew that at the time. It was also a very early encounter, thus being so low, but it can be difficult and sorely boring after a brief while. At least I finally learned what the heck that phrase belonged to after many eons of bad memory.
Kenji, come in.
One of the earliest examples of sonokinetics is here. As infamous as Ecco was, it was still a unique experience. We all know the gist. We play as the male dolphin who knows how to sing with his echolocation to talk with other creatures, communicate with crystals, or sometimes confuse and bash through enemies. He has a dash move and can swim fast and flip, and it gives a sort of introductory stage featuring his home pod. That is until he accidentally touches the sky as it flashes, suddenly scared a lot of kids, myself included, as everything is being sucked up in that vortex. And he's left alone and on to adventure, even later dealing with an alien or two. Like other contenders, it may be frustrating, but it's kinda overwhelmingly abhorred. It's just something I hadn't seen before at the time. I thought it was just me with its strenuous level design, especially when running out of air faster than a real dolphin, or out of energy. But since we got guides now, I hope it'd make the difference. Still, I find Ecco to be interesting as an animal lover, and it's not every day we play as a cetacean anyway. His other installments seem a lot more promising, so it was a harsh start. But just like any creature, Ecco does evolve. Being based off of one of nature's intelligent creatures isn't too shabby, and it seems to be the adventure and uniqueness that draws me in. I take this as the inspiration of Flipper or the incredible Mr. Limpet, and haters can just be too harsh. It's been the earliest experience of nature in video game form, even before I got acquainted with Undersea Adventure or Evo: The Search for Eden. It was developed in Hungary, who are fond with animal protagonists. So Ecco might as well receive the benefit of the doubt. Its smooth puzzle solving can eventually break the mold. You don't always need an explosion, a fatality, or pointless celebrity to make a Genesis game stand out. Just to enjoy nature's potential is what the gamer would occasionally need. I'm not usually a fan of shooters, but before Star Fox existed, this was definitely a cool exception. Phelios, like another contender, is an action-packed vertical shooter game heavily based on Greek mythology. I bet it was a mega hit at the arcades. At first, I actually thought Apollo, the main guy, was riding a white bird like a hawk or a seagull of sorts, as valiant as Asgarth, but I saw much later in life it's actually a cool Pegasus. Unfortunately, he falls off that ride as soon as he takes 3 hits. Needless to say, this game can be remarkably difficult, hence the low rating. Despite that, there's still the difficulty setting which seems uncommon nowadays. Nevertheless, these Genesis games tend to have that steep difficulty like Ecco, Green Dog, Flashback, etc. However, the charm of Greek mythology can still be a positive factor. At least it's better than that gritty, sexualized god of war, that's for true. It's challenging and engaging, and it was very intriguing on learning about Greek legends early such as Apollo, Pegasus, Medusa, Cerberus, Artemis, even Typhon before Final Fantasy VI was a thing. There may be a creepy factor or two, especially with Medusa, and requires a lot of tricky maneuvers. Still, I never saw it ever be mentioned on any countdown ever. Although, just like a later contender, this can be an interesting introduction to Greek mythology. Just maybe pack a guide handy before you take the skies. Awesome Possum was an okay SEGA classic. It's not entirely one of the best, but I feel it has been overhated, much like other underdogs I defend. We follow the title hero as he dashes through numerous environments while picking up cans located throughout, as he bashes through Dr. Machino and his army of robots, polluting the earth and endangering wildlife. Being a fan of Widget back in the day, I didn't mind in how cheesy Awesome Possum was. Heck, I even wished it'd be a crossover of Widget or Captain Planet in a way. I was a naive kid. Anything was possible. The levels had a sort of retro beauty to it, and the Planet Saver meets up with some animal buddies along the way, such as a rhino, a bee, a seagull, or a manta ray. Just a quick side note, this game was created a couple years before DKC was a thing, so they were just the prototypes. Also, I always used to love its sound test, which was a common feature in most Sega Genesis games. And I often set it to motor mouth because I found the possum's quotes to be cute and captivating before Gex or Ratchet would wear out their welcome. I remembered feeling upset when that game suddenly disappeared off my parents' second shop's shelves. I often even fantasize having crossovers with him and Bubsy, since they each had their quirky charm and are underrated platforming mascots, like so many others I'd encountered later on. If it weren't for the tedious level design, the unfair swarms of enemies and hazards, and just cut out the worthless trivia, then it probably would have gotten further. I never cared that it was a ripoff of Sonic nor Mario. I also happen to like Bonk and Bubsy after all. And I won't mind on some competent developer have the rights to him. Just being a hero makes it all worthwhile, no matter what it is. Although dedication and some heart put into a product can go a long way. while I'm not very much a Tiny Toons fan, as it felt more awkward than the usual Looney Tunes, this Genesis classic surely caught my eye. Lunatics Unleashed didn't faze me much neither. Just another case of curiosity getting the cat in my parents' third shop, I think. We of course play as Buster Bunny, Bugs' descendant, who goes on a quest to find pieces of scattered treasure hidden away by Montana Max. While he does, he runs into his adversaries Roderick Rat and Gene Splicer. Oof, the latter's certainly a bad sign. Who had brainwashed Buster's friends such as Dizzy Devil, Hamilton Pig, Calamity Coyote, Plucky Duck, and perhaps Babs too. Kinda reminds me about Bonk's adventure in a sense, shattering their mind-controlling devices on their heads. Anyway, in order to get from level to level, Buster must find Go-Go Dodo, who would take him to a portal leading to one, or somewhere in Wacky Land for a bonus level or two. And I doubt there is a time limit, and if not, this can really be a huge relief. I don't mind it copying some elements of Sonic either. This was made by classic Konami, so you know it's good. Just like the Biker Mice. What's really weird is that this game was renamed in Japan as Tiny Toons Adventures. But what about the NES game itself? Oh jeez, this can be another chronically confused rabbit hole waiting to happen. Just like that rabbit hole. I guess it's a cautionary tale that treachery can be the worst sin anyone can possibly make. Don't ever let yourself or someone else turn on you, even if it's a favorite character you cherish. Otherwise, they and you will experience a world of everlasting torment. The home and debut of another favorable Sonokinetic. Strider has been another hit just out of sheer curiosity way back in 1994. As mentioned there, this was the game that started it all, whether it be introducing me to Hiryu and his legendary cipher, the amazing assistant robots, one of my favorite bosses which I treated as a sort of roller coaster ride, and the domineering Grandmaster with his imperialistic operations. Hiryu's mission is to decimate the corrupt Japanese terrorists from ruling the world with a gazillion iron and plasma fists. Set in 2048, Hiryu's known as the Lone Hunter and Assassin who's tasked on decimating the Empire, and happens to be the youngest A-class ninja specializing in high-tech known as the Striders themselves, hence the name. Perhaps that sort of thing can and will happen in the distant future, just as in The Running Man, subtle or not. No wonder the Balrog had the inspiration for the flying battery in Sonic and Knuckles. Although, I would very much prefer the latter any day, as it was so much easier than that accursed battleship, as I could never get past the damned crushing walls as a kid. Thankfully, Nintendo Complete shown me the way. As difficult as it was, I'd still consider it as a classic, as well as a way to introduce newer or casual fans to the Strider series, which eventually kick-started Hiryu's role in the crossover fighting games. The soundtrack's addictive, as is the destructive blade slicing through anything in its path. And I even shared some elements from it in my VR Troopers Warfic, some of its music in my virtual soundtracks, and even their concept on controlling the Gator Cortex in my Bouncer Tetralogy. It can be a doozy, yet still a good choice for intermediate platformers. This license-based classic can just make the Genesis incomplete without it. There was bound to be a Disney installment on this Genesis repertoire somewhere. God almighty, how I wish we'd get back to the awesome Renaissance days again. Originally, Quackshot was gonna make the cut, but Aladdin seemed to be more relenting. At the time, even by Disney standards, it was very hyped on playing the game based on a hit movie. It always makes that illusion as if you're in it. And the soon-to-be Prince's Adventure is no exception. Of course, it takes elements straight off the film and it expands on it with numerous challenges. We do play as the main protagonist who can run, slices with his short sword, throw apples, jumps, hangs on ropes, and make camels spit. With his sword-swinging sidekick Abu on occasion during his own tricky bonus levels. Not really crazy about the genie's game, though. The title hero traverses through Agrabah collecting Aladdin lives, genie heads, and mostly the scarab pieces located throughout, until he defeats Jafar himself and restore the Desert Kingdom. Pretty simple. And there's no pressure since unlike the intimidating Mario World, there's no time limit. The difficulty is also fair and can be challenging if set to hard with fewer lives and a shorter smokestack life meter. It does feature all the characters, even the voice actors from the film it's based on, almost like an extended plot to it. And the Genesis tunes aren't too shabby for a license-based port. This port was more promising than the SNES or the Game Boys, and it's easy to see why since it sold 4 million copies and is considered one of the best sellers for the Genesis overall. It's a fun and exhilarating adventure, and it has never been bastardized, since it was from a mega hit. Now, if only modern games were made this way without being cash grabs and rush jobs, only to make a quick buck. Without care nor effort, you might as well be a woke needle buried within the Agrabah desert. Let me just make one thing clear. Back in the 90s, Ren and Stimpy was as important as Food and Water with its grossed out humor, like the younger version of Beavis and Butthead. MTV and Nick have the same parent company, Paramount, after all. However, I was always turned away by all of its disgusting humor, excepting the gassy plushies, though. Those were the only exceptions. Unfortunately, their video games aren't far behind in the rejection department, and Vidiots for the SNES was downright the worst. Fortunately, it wasn't until I stumbled upon a more tolerable installment, on the Genesis no less, which happens to only be Vidiots' better prequel. The Ren and Stimpy show, Stimpy's Invention. Just like with Vidiots, it's a basic common platformer. However, unlike the nefarious title, you actually play as both Ren and Stimpy cooperatively instead of being dick rivals. And you can actually switch them at any time, just as convenient as those awesome tag teams in the Donkey Kong Country series. The story goes that Stimpy, aka Dr. Stupid, has made his latest machine, the Mutate-O-Matic, which is said to transform everyday trash into food. How I wish this actually existed, That can certainly benefit our lives tenfold. As skeptical as Ren was before he regressed into an axe-crazy murderer, Stimpy cranked up the volume, which made his prototype explode and scattered its missing pieces throughout the whole town. It's up to the Doofus duo to retrieve them, assemble them, and to turn the machine off. Literally. Since it's a Ren and Stimpy installment, as if it was a part of the show, you're bound to come across some weird and creepy stuff. Whether it be the anthro eyes jumping around, going inside a large freezer facing a belly-slamming walrus, being filled with helium, log clouds, a dog pound that's right next to a wrestling ring. The game is so insane, matching the series' shady nature. You collect food items to replenish your health, courtesy of the Invention, and the duo share the same life bar like with Beavis and Butthead. They each perform different attacks like Stimpy spinning hairballs, or Ren being thrown like a rubber chicken, or have different recovery moves like Stimpy's farts or Ren's copter lips. They were versatile despite being controversial even before Smash Bros. Made fighters adaptable. And this was actually a hell of a lot easier than its successor. There were some potholes along the way in the intimidating highway, but it was still a lot more tolerant and short. Then again, it was originally intended to be similar to an episode of the series. This was before the infective sponge came to be, before everything went sour and convoluted, so it was definitely a welcoming addition to the Genesis and Nicktoon game repertoire. No Genesis games list can possibly be complete without mentioning its debut classic, Altered Beast. Just like in Phelios, this was based on Greek mythology, and we play as either one or two Roman centurions in co-op or no. The objective is to rescue Zeus's daughter Athena from Neph, the ruler of Hades. As a beat-em-up with light platforming and constant auto-scrolling, it has been a mega hit. The best part being we can do basic jumps, punches, and kicks. But once we collect all 3 spirit balls after knocking down 3 blue 2-headed wolves, that is when the true fun begins. We transform either as a werewolf wielding basic fireballs and powerful thrusts, my favorite, the were-dragon with flight, lightning bolts, and electric field, the were-bear with its curled jumps and petrifying breath, the were-tiger with its zigzagging fireballs, and the golden werewolf with the OG's abilities. It can be a bit steep, but if mastered, it can take up to about 10 minutes, so it has good pacing. This was actually the director Uchida's first game that he developed with the help of another programmer. He had those ideas of these transformations being inspired by Michael Jackson's Thriller, including The Howling, and even from the Ray Harryhausen films, while also adding Greek elements to his own ideas, which actually resulted the Genesis to sell like hotcakes straight out of the arcade before Sonic's inception. Not bad for a novice. I wonder if he tried the 2005 remake yet. Screw Kid Icarus and God of War. This was my all-time favorite go-to Greek mythology game. A true legend for the ages, despite SEGA being its anagram. There was a reason why I mentioned the Lemmings as one of my favorite petites, so here goes. Ever since I was 5, at my parents' second shop no less, I was hooked. I had never seen anyone so small can make a huge impact. These little critters work as a swarm, and they are versatile, possessing many things a human can wield. They can climb, use parachutes, build bridges, dig, mine, and make themselves explode. And they'd said Mortal Kombat set off the bells and whistles. Anyway, each of these little guys must reach the goal through tumultuous landscapes and avoid hazards such as pitfalls, lava, or booby traps. This Sunsoft and Psygnosis classic seemed to be the Pikmin's predecessor, and I much rather prefer the green-haired mammals over the mutated carrots any day. In fact, after it came out on the Amiga, it's been renowned as the widest number of ports, and its popularity grew until the late 90s. Even sharing the same fate with the Worms as Team 17 developed them for the PSP port. There's the addictive gameplay and soundtrack, which packs a lot of jammers, for the most part. Although the difficulty accompanied with time limits, confusing layouts, and sudden deaths can make this game a chore to play, especially when there always seems to be a certain requirement before advancing. Plus, the passwords can also be a pain to memorize. If you have enough patience and dedication, the Lemmings can be an unstoppable force, and I still find it to be one of the most underappreciated gems, both to the versatile species and the game itself. This has always been my GOAT retro Disney game ever since I was 4. No matter how creepy it tended to get, the Castle of Illusion coincidentally takes the 4th spot. I can never resist it being the various immersive environments, the dreadful or otherworldly music, in conjunction with simple platforming. Disney was definitely at its prime during the Renaissance, and it definitely shows here and this early in the decade. The story's simple. Mickey and Minnie Mouse frolic in a flowery meadow until a sudden thunderstorm startled the couple. I can't blame them since I happen to be an astrophobic. By that, they got separated as a witch named Mizrabel captures Minnie and takes her to her haunted castle in order to rejuvenate herself at a ripe age. Kind of the same thing as with the evil queen, Gruntilda, or even Ultimecia. Sure, it seems cliché, but it does prompt Mickey to rescue his equal, as he ventures through a forest, a toyland, a vicious watery storm, a dessert factory, a library, and finally the heart of the castle itself. In order to save Minnie, Mickey must collect the 7 gems of the rainbow from each Master of Illusion to access the tower via Bifrost Bridge and combat Mizrabel's spells. Keep in mind, this was before Sonic came to be. 1 year, in fact. Just to let consumers know, as it was made in 1990 to avoid confusion on a rodent collecting 7 colorful emeralds. Maybe Japan and Yuji Naka had that same idea. Just like with Aladdin, Mickey also tosses limited apples as well as marbles toward his enemies, and increases energy in extra tries. But unlike the young prince, he can actually jump onto them, if you press the button twice. While it seems like a casual, everyday platformer, it's not without its steep challenges. especially if you crank up the difficulty. However, this was just more fun and engaging than other early Disney titles such as Quackshot or Fantasia. I've yet to try the PS3 remake, but I doubt it'd be as nostalgic as the Genesis original, much as the Strider reboot. I definitely recommend to any beginner or veteran, if they want something other than the blue blur. Despite the re-releases and remake, I wish this game was brought up more often. I'm sure many consumers would prefer Quackshot or Aladdin, but I just disdain how this game is always left in the darkness, even more than in an opaque storm. It seems as depressing as some of the gloomy feels it tends to have. If you're a veteran follower of mine, then you know I definitely love this unsung sports game. Mutant League Football was my all-time favorite athletic title on the Sega Genesis. The humor and weird charm impacted me so much that I decided to have the Mutant League team up with the VR Troopers. I think it was around 94-ish when I randomly saw that bloody font and gave it a chance, and I'd been hooked ever since, despite not knowing how these formations work. And ever since then, those two properties became inseparable. I love the alien dragon-like species, and the teams featuring them were my main teams. And little by little, the mutant accepting the techies were enlisted as allies in Toku. So much so that I made a warfic as closure to both sides. I mean, hell, the troopers need an army somewhat against Grimlord's diabolical forces. It actually spawned a few spiritual successors such as Mutant League Hockey, its own brief animated series, both within a year later, and even the Mutant Football League by Kickstarter back in 2017. Aside from Cafe by the Way or Friday Night Arcade, I've never heard anyone bring it up on any mainstream countdown. It should never be ignored as a parody football game with a lot of the elements intact from other sports simulators. The music's brief, though wacky, the environments are deadly, the characters including their deaths or tempers are hysterical, and it's almost like a love child with Mortal Kombat meeting sports talk football. EA was at its prime before their wokeness days, and it definitely shows in their products such as this and Skate or Die. I'd recommend to any football fanatic if they want a chaotic change of scenery and its quirky style. The mutants and my love for this underrated installment shall never die. Everyone and their brother would always pick the original Toejam and Earl, and it was so damn popular that it actually had an iOS remake which was considered as the official fourth installment. Why? Why does it seem like the logical choice, let alone tolerating the vindictive luck factor on using packages that can kill you, take forever to find lost ship parts, and always be chased down by the horrifying boogeyman, crowds, and tornadoes? Why? Aside from the fun sound test and most of the music, I always abhorred that installment ever since I was a tween. But there was a sliver of light at the end of the bleak, creepy tunnel. enter its better sequel. I don't care how most consumers and reviewers condemn this game as the radical departure from the original's vindictive setup. Instead, we have a 2D platformer, and the only one of its kind in the series, no less. We still play as the funky duo who had just returned to their home planet from their perilous adventures on Earth as they just got their spaceship, the Ratmaster rocket ship, repaired. They'd soon noticed there were many antagonistic Earthlings who acted as stowaways who arrived and wreaked great havoc. And we wonder why aliens keep attacking us, right? Just like with Stimpy's Invention, you can play either as Toejam or Earl, or even play cooperatively. Unlike the OG game though, your mission is to throw capsules at the intruders, until they're weak enough to be shrunk and sealed into one. But you must hurry before they should burst out and escape. Captivity was invented before Pokemon took it. After all the Earthlings are found and captured, the duo tosses all the capsules in a burlap sack and have the Ratmaster rocket ship ascend, returning them to the vile planet. Unlike its predecessor, Toejam and Earl 2 allows us to interact with aliens, even party in some rap sessions, introducing the Hyperfunk Zone, even have an easier time swimming. It may be as narrow as a twig and a departure from the original's finesse, but I never cared in the slightest. Most of the games I played on the Genesis, especially in general around the 90s, were of course platformers, so I felt right at home. Despite the music being a tad weaker, and it has no sound test, but at least I can always revisit in the OG. Hell, because of its simplicity, this was actually the first and only Toejam and Earl game I'd ever beaten. I always hate the luck factor ever since I was a wee lass, which is why I despise casinos. So, no matter how much criticism and sometimes undeserved hate that this game gets, it's best to appreciate it as the black sheep than not say anything at all. Alright, we blasted through 14 Genesis gems, but before we get to the fastest and best game there was, let's have the honorable and dishonorable mentions play. While most consumers would rather decide Sonic 3 plus Knuckles, this is my GOAT Sonic game. Ever since I was 5, I always preferred this over its predecessor and its several successors. It was just the goldmine from my parents' second shop. I was instantly adored by Miles Tails Prower. That adorable little two-tailed fox remained as my all-time favorite animal and Sonic character. So much so that he was the preamble on making me love foxes. Sure, it introduced Tails, thus not allowing him to fly nor swim till Sonic 3 anyway, but I never cared. This game alone introduced the iconic spin dash attack, in which the fox introduced canonically. And the best part is that it was developed by SEGA of America, which voted and kept Tails as their first successor to Sonic. On top of that, because it wasn't produced in Japan, there wasn't a speed cap, thus going twice as fast as the original or in Sonic 3. Even in Versus mode, you can barely see the competition as you can compete with another player, which was the first of its kind. Even playing cooperatively, as long as Tails doesn't leave the screen, or whether or not you want to play as either or in a solo campaign, Tails doesn't really need to fly since he's got super speed to make up for it. It wasn't long until the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was on the airwaves, and these two fast forces of nature made me a Tails fan for life. Even making Robotnik a lot more interesting, along with the Sacred Chaos Emeralds. It's no wonder they remained as my most nostalgic Sonic media ever. So too, there was eventually the second live-action movie promoting both Tails and Knuckles. Nevertheless, Sonic 2 still gave us the most iconic simple bromance since the Mario Bros, and even before Lou and Lau. Ever since I first saw it within that chest of games, it was definitely love at first sight. The idea of including a fox, the charm, despite the poster causing some scopophobia, and always the enjoyment surpassing the latter Genesis titles, and especially the Game Gear version. It did take me nearly an eternity to use Super Sonic or beat the game, but it was just double the fun with Sonic and Knuckles. Oh man! Gliding with the Echidna and collecting the emeralds easier were like breaking the game in two. If only Sonic 2 would have transitioned like 3 did. Nevertheless, I always love using Knuckles and Tails as my mains with these two together. A match made in heaven without the tumultuousness 3 and Knuckles offers. How I wish Team Sonic would have worked in sync, till eons later with Sonic Heroes, and even the fan-made ROM hack of classic Sonic Heroes. Consumers would always lean objectively to Sonic 3, but subjectively, I'd stand by its sequel as much as Super Mario Bros. 2 or Diddy's Conquest. It solidified fans to Sonic, and above all made the Genesis to be a decent competitor to the SNES during the console war of the 16-bit era. Even though Nintendo won back in the 90s, it's no wonder Sonic 2 won the hearts of many while stationed at the Silicon Valley. I'm the Ecron writer, and Sonic 2 will forever be my utmost favorite Sonic and Sega Genesis game that Team Sonic and Sega of America has ever concocted. It's without question it has its many remakes, including elements for Sonic Mania. It is simple, nostalgic, fun, exhilarating with its phenomenal speed, intuitional, and unbeatable. If only there shall be a 3D remaster of that. I'd recommend this gold mine to any and every new or old Sonic and Sega fan, 'cause it often takes the power of two to be timeless.